My daughter-in-law walked into my home 36 times without asking. She said she was helping me. I said she was stealing from me. When I told her to stop coming, she smiled and said I was being silly. She thought I was just an old woman who couldn't remember where she put things. She didn't know I used to be a police detective who caught bad people for 30 years. That night at 2 in the morning, my special camera caught her breaking in, and I finally trapped her. Before I tell you how I made her pay for what she did, please like and subscribe if you ever had to teach someone who thought you were weak. I came home to my small apartment at 10 in the morning. My door was open just a little bit. It was the second time this week. The hallway smelled like flowers and mean thoughts. It was the smell of Lisa. I didn't call her name. I didn't get scared. I closed my door very quietly and listened hard. I heard sounds from my bedroom. Someone was walking around in there. A silly person would have yelled and asked who was there. But I spent 30 years catching thieves, and I know you should watch before you speak. I walked very quietly to my bedroom. The door was open a tiny bit. Through the crack I could see her. Lisa was looking through my dresser drawers. Her hands were pulling out my clothes and throwing them on the floor. She picked up my jewelry box. She opened it and looked inside like she owned everything in it. She took out my gold necklace. She held it up to the light like she was checking if it was real gold. Then she put it in her pocket without any care. She was looking for money or things to sell. She was looking for my bank papers or maybe a secret hiding place where I kept cash. I watched her for 1 whole minute. I watched her look under my bed. I watched her open my closet and search through my coat pockets. She moved like someone who thought nobody would ever catch her. She moved like someone who believed the apartment and the person living in it belonged to her. Are you looking for my treasure? Or are you just checking if I'm still breathing, Lisa? My voice was calm and strong. She didn't jump up scared. She didn't scream. She stopped moving for just 1 second, then turned around with a big fake smile on her face. "Oh, Margaret, you scared me so much," she said like I was the one doing something wrong. "I was just stopping by to make sure you didn't fall down or forget to eat. You know how forgetful you get these days." So confused. I looked at my open drawer. I looked at my bed that she had messed up. I looked at her. "You're checking if I ate by looking through my underwear drawer and taking my necklace? That's a very strange way to help, Lisa. You have a key I never gave you. This is the 36th time you came into my home without asking in 3 months." Lisa laughed really loud. It was a mean laugh that bounced off my bedroom walls. 36 times. Listen to yourself, Margaret. You're making up stories again. Tommy told me you were getting paranoid and seeing things. I come here to help you and clean up. This place is dirty and messy. If you're going to be mean and ungrateful, maybe I should just stop coming and let you live alone in this mess. She pushed past me, bumping my shoulder really hard on purpose. She smelled like lies and that strong flower perfume. She stopped at my front door and looked back at me. Her eyes looked at me not like a mother-in-law, but like something she wanted to get rid of quickly. "You should say thank you. A woman your age living alone in this bad neighborhood is dangerous. You're losing your mind, Margaret. Everyone can see it happening, even Tommy." She walked out and left my door wide open behind her. She didn't care if I was safe or not. She wanted me to feel scared and small. I walked to the door and locked it tight. My hands didn't shake at all. My heart kept beating normally. She was trying to make me feel crazy, but she picked the wrong woman to trick. She thought I was losing my mind. She didn't know I was just getting started with my plan. I called Tommy that same night. I told him it was really important. He came over at 6 o'clock, looking very tired and smelling like the hamburgers he ate in his car so he wouldn't have to go home to Lisa. My son, the boy I raised to be good and honest, had become someone who hid from his own life. He sat on my old blue couch and wouldn't look at me. I put my black notebook on the coffee table between us. It was a simple book with writing in it. Date, time, how long she stayed, what things she touched. "Read it, Tommy," I said. He picked it up and turned the pages without really reading any words. He let out a big tired breath, the kind of breath he had practiced many times. "Mom, we talked about this already. Lisa is just trying to help you. She worries about you so much. She's breaking into my home, Tommy. She's going through my things. She's looking for money. Today she told me I was imagining everything. She told me I was paranoid and crazy. And now you're not even reading what I wrote down." Tommy dropped the notebook back on the table. Made a loud sound when it hit. "Because it's not real proof, Mom. Just a list of things you think happened. Lisa tells me everything she does for you. She says you forget who she is sometimes. She says she found the oven on last week when nobody was cooking. She says you called her by Grandma Rose's name." I felt a cold, sharp pain in my heart. It wasn't my old heart problem. It was knowing that my son was gone. He had been replaced by this weak, scared man who would lie about his own mother to keep his wife happy. I never left the oven on. I never called her Rose. You know, my brain works perfectly fine. I still read big books every day, Tommy. I still remember everyone's birthday without writing it down. Why are you lying to protect her? Tommy stood up fast. His face turned red with anger and embarrassment. "I'm not lying. I'm trying to deal with a hard situation. You're 68 years old, Mom. You live in a cheap apartment that smells old. You don't have much money. You don't have a big future ahead of you. We're trying to figure out what to do to help you before you hurt yourself. Lisa thinks we should look at nursing homes, places where trained people can watch you all the time." Nursing homes. The words hung in the air like poison smoke. They were building a story about me. They were creating a legal case to prove I was too old and confused to take care of myself. If they could prove I couldn't think straight, they could take control of my money. They could control the little bit of savings they thought I had. I stood up and looked my son right in the eyes. He looked away quickly. "I'm not going to any home, Tommy. And I'm not having episodes or forgetting things. I'm telling you that your wife is a thief and a liar. And you're letting her do it because you're too scared to tell her no." Tommy grabbed his coat fast. "I'm done listening to you attack Lisa. If you keep saying mean things about her, we're going to have to take legal action to protect you from yourself. We're doing this because we love you, Margaret. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He walked out fast. He slammed my door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I stood there in the quiet of my apartment. I looked at the notebooks sitting on the table. They thought I was a helpless old woman holding on to her last few years of freedom. They thought I was easy to trick. I walked to my window and watched Tommy get into his car down on the street. He sat there for a minute with his head on the steering wheel. I felt sorry for him for just a second, but then I pushed that feeling away. Feeling sorry for people makes you weak. Feeling sorry hides the truth. And right now the truth was clear as glass. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to rob me. The next morning felt heavy and strange. I woke up knowing something bad had happened while I slept. I did my morning routine exactly the same as always. Black coffee with no sugar. Toast with no butter. I sat at my desk, which was really just a folding table in the corner of my living room. I kept papers there. Fake papers labeled pension information and medical bills. I had arranged them in a very specific way the night before. One corner of the blue folder was lined up perfectly with the edge of the table. The blue folder had been moved. It was off by half an inch. Lisa had come back during the night or very early morning. I had slept through her breaking in. That scared me more than anything else so far. I checked what was inside the papers. Nothing was missing. They were boring papers anyway, nothing important. But then I looked at the small wooden box on the shelf above my table. It was a plain box made of light brown wood. Inside I kept the only thing that really mattered to me in this whole apartment. My mother's silver ring. It was old and didn't shine anymore. It had stopped fitting my finger 5 years ago when Mom died. It was worth maybe $10 to a pawn shop. But to me it was my whole history. I opened the box slowly. It was empty. The anger that filled me up wasn't hot and wild. It was ice cold and clear. It was the calm feeling of a judge deciding someone's punishment. She had taken Mom's ring. She didn't take it to sell it. It wasn't worth any money. She took it to hurt me. She took it to make me search everywhere for it, to make me act crazy and upset, To make me prove to Tommy that I was losing things and forgetting where I put them. Took out my phone. My fingers typed fast on the screen. Give back the ring, Lisa. Right now. The answer came back 3 minutes later. What ring? Oh dear Margaret, you're losing things again and blaming other people. Tommy told me you threw out your mail last week by accident. Maybe check the trash can. Look in the garbage. I stared at my phone screen. She was making fun of me. She was enjoying this game. She thought she was the smart cat playing with a dying mouse. She thought I would run to the garbage and dig through old food looking for my ring. She thought I would call Tommy crying and screaming, proving I had finally lost my mind completely. I didn't answer her message. I put my phone down carefully. I walked to my bookshelf. Hidden between an old cookbook and a phone book from 10 years ago was a small black thing. It looked like a screw that held the shelf together. It was actually a tiny camera with a wide lens that could see in the dark. I had put it there after she broke in the 5th time. I hadn't checked it yet because I wanted to wait until I had enough proof for a criminal arrest, not just a family fight. But today was different. Today was the day I needed to see everything. I opened my laptop computer. I turned on the secret password protection. I pulled up the video from last night. The time at the bottom said 3:14 in the morning. My front door opened slowly. Lisa slipped inside like a shadow. She wasn't wearing her normal daytime clothes. She was wearing all black, trying to look invisible in the darkness. She went straight to my desk. She looked through the blue folder quickly. Then she reached up high and took the ring from the wooden box. She held it up to the moonlight coming through my window. She smiled a mean, ugly smile. It was a twist of her mouth that showed how much she hated me. She put the ring in her pocket, but she didn't leave right away. She pulled out her phone. She turned on the flashlight. She opened the drawer where I kept my bank papers. My real bank papers for the checking account I used to pay my electric bill. Not the big secret accounts, just the everyday money. She didn't steal the papers. She spread them out flat on my desk. She took pictures of every single page with her phone. She took pictures of my social security card. She took pictures of my driver's license. She took pictures of the paper that showed where my cemetery plot was, the place where I would be buried next to Mom someday. I froze the video. Her face was lit up by the light from her phone. She looked hungry like a wolf. She wasn't just trying to gaslight me anymore. She wasn't just trying to put me in a nursing home. She was stealing my identity. She was building a complete file so she could take over all my money the second someone said I was too confused to handle it myself. I leaned back in my chair. The anger settled into a hard knot in my stomach. They wanted to play games and treat me like a silly old fool. They wanted to take away my history and my freedom. I looked at the computer screen one more time. I saved the video to a USB stick. Then I saved it to a cloud server on the internet. Then I saved it to a second cloud server just to be extra safe. You want the ring, Lisa? You can keep that ring. Because you just gave me something way more valuable than a piece of old silver. You gave me a reason. You gave me proof. And you gave me permission to stop acting like a grandmother and start acting like the detective who put 200 criminals in jail. Closed my laptop. I didn't call Tommy. I didn't text Lisa back. I went to my closet and pulled out my best outfit. The dark blue dress, the one I hadn't worn in 5 years. I brushed off the dust from the shoulders. I put on a clean white shirt underneath. I tied my hair back in a neat style. I looked in the mirror. The tired old woman was gone. Detective Margaret Hayes was back in charge. It was time to visit my old friend Susan at the law office. It was time to open the gates and let the trap snap shut. The tall glass doors of the Patterson and Chen Law Building showed me a reflection of someone I hadn't seen in a long time. The blue dress fit a little looser than before, but I stood up straight and tall. I walked past the security guard at the front desk without stopping. He started to stand up to ask if I had an appointment, but I just kept walking with confidence. He sat back down. I didn't stop at the reception desk on the 12th floor either. The young woman behind the fancy desk started to get up and open her mouth to ask who I was looking for. I simply held up one finger to say wait, and kept walking toward the corner office with the big windows. I knew she wouldn't call anyone fast enough to stop me. I opened the heavy wooden doors without knocking. Susan Chen was standing by the tall window, looking out at the city below. She didn't turn around right away. She took a sip from a glass cup and let the silence fill the room for a moment. Susan was 55 years old and had a scary reputation. She was known for making powerful people cry when they had to answer her questions in court. She was dangerous and smart, like a shark wearing expensive clothes. She turned around slowly. Her eyes got smaller, then wider with surprise. "Maggie," she said my nickname like it was from a ghost story. "I heard you retired from the force. I heard you were living a quiet, simple life on the South Side, feeding birds in the park and watching game shows on television." I closed the door behind me and locked it with a click. The sound echoed in the huge office. I was trying to do that. I really was. But retirement doesn't work well when your family decides you're too old to fight back. I sat down in the leather chair across from her desk. Cost more money than all my furniture put together. I placed a small USB stick on her shiny wooden desk. It looked tiny and unimportant sitting there. Susan sat down in her big chair. She looked at the USB stick, then at me. "Is that about money or about family?" "It's about crime," I said flatly. She plugged the stick into her computer. I watched her face as the video played. I knew exactly what she was seeing. She was seeing the timestamp showing 3:14 in the morning. She was seeing someone break into my home without permission. She was seeing the theft of my ring. But then she leaned forward in her chair. Her professional face changed to show real concern. She saw Lisa taking pictures of my personal documents. Susan stopped the video. She looked up at me with sharp eyes that could see through lies. "She's not just stealing little things, Maggie. She's building a complete file on you. That's identity theft. That's elder abuse. She's taking pictures of your social security number and your property papers. She's getting ready to take over your whole life." I nodded slowly. I leaned back and crossed my arms. I know exactly what she's doing. She thinks I'm a confused old lady who forgets where she puts her keys. She spent 3 months making me look crazy, moving my things around, stealing small stuff, telling my son that I'm losing my memory. She wants to put me in a nursing home, Susan. She wants power of attorney so she can control my money. Susan took a long drink from her glass. She put it down hard on the desk. "We can file a restraining order today. We can sue her for damages in civil court. I can have a police officer at her house by dinner time giving her legal papers that will scare her badly. We can destroy her financially, Maggie. We can make sure she never gets within 500 feet of you ever again." I shook my head firmly. "No, that's not enough. A restraining order is just a piece of paper. A lawsuit is just a deal where everyone compromises. She'll play the victim and cry to Tommy. She'll tell the judge she was only trying to help her poor, sick mother-in-law. She'll get a small punishment, maybe community service or a fine. And I'll spend the rest of my life always worried and looking behind me." I stood up and walked to the big window. I looked down at the city streets far below. I remembered the last time I stood in this office. It was 8 years ago. We had just finished building a case against a man who was stealing from old people in nursing homes. I didn't catch him by looking at bank statements. I caught him by watching how he acted and understanding how liars think. "I'm not a victim, Susan. You know what I used to do for 30 years. You know who I really am." Susan smiled slowly. It was a cold, scary smile that made me feel better. "You're the detective who caught the Riverside scam using nothing but receipts and patience. You're the investigator who found evidence the FBI couldn't find because they weren't looking in the right places." "Exactly right," I said, turning back to face her. "I don't want to sue her in civil court. I want to catch her doing something so bad that she can't talk her way out of it. I want criminal charges that stick. I want jail time. I want her to understand that she broke into the wrong woman's home." Susan tapped her fingers on the desk slowly. She was thinking hard and planning. She was seeing the whole game board laid out in front of her. "If you want criminal charges, you need more proof than just this video. This footage is good evidence, But a smart defense lawyer could say she had permission to be there. They could argue she was checking on your finances to help you manage your money. We need to prove she meant to steal important things. We need to prove she was planning something really bad. I walked back to her desk. I made my voice quieter and more serious. That's exactly why I came to you. I'm not living in that apartment because I have to, Susan. You know the truth. I own the whole building. You helped me set up the secret company 12 years ago to buy it. Susan nodded once, remembering. Hayes Property Holdings. You own the entire Forest Glen apartment complex. 6 floors. I do. But Lisa doesn't know that. Tommy doesn't know it either. They think I'm just a poor tenant who pays rent every month. I'm going to move out, Susan. I'm going to move upstairs to the top floor apartment, but I'm going to leave my old apartment exactly like it is. And I'm going to change what that apartment is used for legally. Susan raised one eyebrow. She was listening very carefully now, leaning forward. Change it to what? Change it from a home where someone lives to a private storage room for Hayes Property Holdings. I want you to write up the legal papers today. I want signs put up inside the apartment that people can only see after they walk in. Signs that say no entry. Private business property. Important documents stored here. I'm going to set a trap. I explained my whole plan step by step. I explained the locked box I was going to leave behind. I explained the rumors I would spread about having cash hidden. Susan listened carefully. Her eyes got brighter as she understood. She saw how beautiful and perfect the plan was. If Lisa broke into a home to check on an old lady, it was just a family problem. If she broke into a business storage room and tried to open a locked box after being told to stay out, it was burglary and breaking into commercial property. That meant serious federal crimes with mandatory jail time. You're a ruthless woman, Maggie, Susan said quietly, but there was respect in her voice. I'm a mother who just realized her son became a coward and married a predator, I replied honestly. I spent my whole life finding the truth by looking at evidence carefully. The evidence tells me that my family is broken, morally and financially. I'm just closing the case and making sure justice happens. Susan opened her laptop and started typing fast. I'll write up the lease agreement between you and the holding company right now. We'll say it starts tomorrow. We'll tell the police station that the unit contains sensitive business records. If she breaks in after you move out, she's not visiting grandma anymore. She's robbing a business. I watched her type. I felt a cold satisfaction spreading through me. This was familiar ground. This wasn't the messy emotional confusion of family drama and hurt feelings. This was law and order. This was cause and effect. This was justice. Lisa had created a debt she owed. I was about to collect payment. Susan looked up from her computer screen. What about Tommy? He's your son, Maggie. If he's with her when she gets caught breaking in, he's going to jail too as her partner in crime. I felt my jaw twitch with tension. I thought about Tommy sitting on my couch, refusing to look at the evidence I showed him. I thought about him telling me I was having memory problems and seeing things that weren't real. I thought about him choosing the easy path because he was afraid of his wife's anger. I gave him a chance, Susan. I showed him my notebook. I told him the truth about what was happening. He chose to believe her lies instead. If he stands next to the fire, he's going to get burned by it. I can't save someone who refuses to grab the rope I'm throwing. Susan nodded. She understood completely. In our line of work, we learned early that you can't save everyone who needs help. Sometimes you have to let a rotten building fall down so you can clear away the bad parts and start fresh. One more thing, I said firmly. I need backup ready. I don't want a regular patrol car showing up 20 minutes late to write a report. I want police officers ready and waiting. I want them caught doing the crime. I want handcuffs on their wrists before they can run away. Susan picked up her office phone. I'll call Captain Rodriguez. He owes me a favor from the union corruption case last year. He hates thieves, especially thieves who hurt elderly people. He'll love this story. She paused and looked at me seriously. You understand that once we do this, there's no going back, right? You're sending your daughter-in-law to jail. You're destroying your son's marriage. You're going to be alone. I stood up and smoothed down my dress. I looked at my reflection in the window glass. I saw the old woman that Lisa saw when she looked at me. But underneath that, I saw the detective, the hunter, the woman who never lost a case. I've been alone since Mom died, Susan. I just didn't fully realize it until I saw Lisa holding my heart medicine up to her ear, shaking it to see how many pills were left, checking if I was close to dying yet. I'm not destroying a family. I'm removing a cancer that was killing me slowly. I walked to the door and put my hand on the handle. Get those papers ready. I'm moving out tomorrow morning. And Susan, she looked up from her computer. Make sure the lease agreement says very clearly that the property owner keeps highly sensitive financial records and tax documents in that unit. Let's make sure the criminal charge carries a mandatory jail sentence that she can't get out of. Susan smiled her dangerous smile. Consider it done. Welcome back to the game, Maggie. I walked out of her office. The air in the hallway felt cooler and cleaner. My heart beat with a steady, strong rhythm. I wasn't sad or confused anymore. I was ready for action. I had a target. I had a plan. And tomorrow morning, I would set the stage for the final scene of this drama. Lisa wanted my money. She wanted my legacy and everything I owned. She was about to find out exactly what that legacy was really worth. And it wasn't what she expected. Susan stared at me from across her huge wooden desk. Her fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. She blinked slowly, like she was trying to understand a mistake in a math problem. You own the building, Maggie? She said the words again with no emotion in her voice. You own the entire Forest Glen apartment building? The building where your daughter-in-law thinks you're barely surviving on government checks. I nodded and took a small sip of the cold water she had given me. It felt cool and good against the dryness in my throat. I bought it in 2003, Susan. It was what they call a distressed property back then. The previous owners had spent all their money making the lobby look fancy with expensive tile, but they didn't fix the plumbing or electrical wiring. I bought it for very little money through a secret trust company. Hayes Property Holdings is the parent company that owns it, but Lisa has never looked past what she can see on the surface. To her, I'm just the old woman in apartment 3C who pays rent with a check every month. She doesn't know I'm actually paying rent to myself through my own company. Susan leaned way back in her leather chair. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a hunter recognizing another skilled hunter in the wild. She pressed a button on her computer and a new document appeared on the screen. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want to move out of your apartment but keep it under your control? No, I corrected her quickly. I don't want to rent it out to anyone new. I want to change what it's used for completely. I want you to write up official company papers right now. Starting immediately, Apartment 3C is no longer a place where people live. It's a secure storage facility for Hayes Property Holdings. We're going to store important financial documents there. Hard copies of old tax returns and audit records. The kind of documents that require federal security levels to protect them properly. Susan's eyes got wide with understanding. She started typing again, her fingernails making a rhythmic clicking sound on the keyboard. I watched the words form on her computer screen, reflected in her glasses. She was writing out a legal death sentence disguised as a simple business zoning change. If we do this, Maggie, she spoke while continuing to type without stopping, we completely change the nature of the crime. If she breaks into a home, it's just burglary. But if she breaks into a commercial storage facility that's marked with federal warning signs and she tries to open a locked safe containing tax records, we're looking at corporate theft and serious identity crimes. We're talking about federal law enforcement getting involved. We're talking about mandatory minimum jail sentences that judges can't reduce. That's exactly the point, I said quietly. I want the punishment to be so serious that she understands how badly she messed up. I want you to include a section about proprietary business secrets in the paperwork. Make the value of the stored documents very clear and specific. If she touches that safe, I want the law to treat it like she broke into a bank vault. Susan stopped typing. She turned her chair to face me directly. The amusement was completely gone from her face, replaced by serious professional concern. Maggie listened to me carefully. This is nuclear-level serious. If she walks into that room with a screwdriver and bad intentions, she's not going to county jail for a few months. She's going to federal prison for years, maybe 10 years. And Tommy, if he's holding the flashlight for her or standing guard outside, he goes down as her accomplice and partner. You're building a trap that could completely destroy your son's entire life. I stood up from my chair and walked over to the wall behind her desk where all her degrees and awards hung in frames. I looked at the framed certificates, the medals, the photos of her shaking hands with mayors and judges. Susan had built an impressive legacy through hard work. I had built a legacy too, through 30 years of detective work. And now I was watching my legacy being torn apart by a woman who thought kindness meant weakness. Tommy made his choice, Susan, I said without turning around to look at her. I called him on the phone. I showed him my evidence notebook. I gave him the opportunity to be a good husband and a good son at the same time. He chose to be a doormat instead. He chose to let his wife go through my medicine cabinet to check if I was dying fast enough for her plans. If he follows her into that storage room, he's not an innocent victim. He's a willing participant. I turned back to face her. My voice dropped lower and became more serious. Do you know what she said to me 2 days ago, Susan? She told me I was lucky she bothered visiting me at all. She told me I was a burden on their lives. She looked at me with eyes that were calculating how much money I was worth based on the cheap furniture she saw in my apartment. She doesn't just want my money. She wants to erase me completely from existence. She wants to have me declared mentally incompetent so she can sign checks in my name and control everything. This isn't just a mean prank or a misunderstanding. This is self-defense for my life and freedom. Susan let out a heavy sigh. It was a deep sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 difficult legal cases she had handled. She turned back to her computer and pressed the enter key with a firm, decisive motion. Fine. The official resolution is written and ready. Hayes Property Holdings officially designates Apartment 3C as a Level 3 secure storage facility for sensitive business documents. I'll have the warning signs professionally printed within 1 hour. You need to put them up the exact second you finish moving your furniture out. Make them big and visible. Warning: restricted access. Authorized personnel only. She hit the print button. The laser printer in the corner of her office hummed loudly, spitting out the pages that would seal Lisa's fate forever. Susan picked up the warm papers fresh from the printer and handed them to me. Sign here as chairman of the board of the holding company. And sign here as the tenant giving up the lease. I signed my name carefully. The ink flowed smoothly across the paper. It felt like signing a peace treaty to end a long and bloody war. Now, Susan said, stacking the papers neatly in a pile, we need to talk about the bait you're leaving behind. You mentioned a locked safe box. What are you going to put inside it, Maggie? Yes, an old-fashioned strongbox. Heavy black metal with a combination lock. I bought it at a yard sale years ago. It looks like it could hold $1 million in cash. I'm going to bolt it to the floor in the middle of the living room so it can't be moved. And what goes inside, Maggie? Susan asked with sharp, focused eyes. If the police open it after catching her, they need to find something inside that justifies the serious felony charges. You can't just leave an empty box or a note saying, "Gotcha." Smiled. It was a cold expression that felt tight on my face. I'm putting fake financial ledgers inside from my old cases. They look very official and important. They're stamped with confidential business records. And I'm putting a GPS tracking device hidden in the lining of the box. It's already active and sending signals. But on top of everything, I'm going to leave one file folder labeled Estate of Margaret Hayes Private. Inside that folder, I'll put a printout showing my actual bank account balance. Just the total amount, not the account numbers. Just the bottom line number. Susan raised one eyebrow high. Why would you do that? Because I want her to see it. I want her to know exactly what she lost the very moment before the police handcuffs closed around her wrists. I want the last thing she sees as a free woman to be the amount of money she was so desperately trying to steal. It's the only inheritance she's ever going to get from me. Susan shook her head slowly, showing a mixture of shock and admiration on her face. You're ice cold, Maggie. That's brutal. I'm a detective, Susan. I believe in showing people the truth clearly. Transparency is important. She handed me a second set of legal documents. This is the lease agreement for the penthouse apartment. Unit 6A on the top floor. Private elevator access that requires a special key. You can move in there tonight if you want. The security system up there is top of the line and modern. You'll be able to monitor the cameras in your old apartment 3C from your new living room television screen in real time. I took the keys from her hand. They were heavy brass rail metal keys, not the cheap plastic cards most apartments use now. They felt substantial and important in my palm. Thank you, Susan. Send the bill to the holding company. Add a bonus for yourself for hazard pay. You've definitely earned it. I started walking toward the door, but Susan stopped me one final time. Maggie, wait just a minute. I turned around to face her. She was looking at me with a softness I didn't see very often in her eyes. If you go through with this plan, there won't be any more family dinners. There won't be any birthday celebrations. You're cutting the connection completely. Are you absolutely sure you can live with that kind of silence and loneliness? I thought carefully about the silence in my apartment after Lisa left my door standing wide open. I thought about the silence of Tommy staring at the floor while his wife called me crazy and senile. That kind of silence felt like the silence of a graveyard. The silence of the penthouse apartment would be the silence of peace and freedom. I've lived surrounded by noise and chaos for too long, Susan. I think I'm really going to enjoy the peace and quiet. I left her office and stepped into the elevator. As the numbers on the display counted down toward the lobby floor, I felt the weight of my plan settling heavily onto my shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but it was solid and real. I was done being the victim in this story. I was done being the confused, helpless old woman everyone could push around. I was the architect and designer of my own life again, taking back control. I walked out of the law office into the afternoon air. The wind was biting and cold, but I didn't button up my coat. I needed to feel it against my skin. I needed to feel alive and awake. I stopped a taxicab on the street and gave the driver the address of a hardware store. I needed bolts and screws. Heavy industrial bolts. The kind that anchor a safe to the floor so securely that you would need a jackhammer and hours of work to move it. Lisa wanted to find buried treasure and hidden money. She wanted to crack the secret code of Margaret Hayes's life. I was going to give her exactly what she wished for. I was going to give her a puzzle she couldn't solve and a prize she would never be able to keep or enjoy. I sat back in the taxi and watched the city go by outside the window in a blur. The game pieces were set. Everything was moving into position. And tomorrow morning, the trap would be fully armed and ready. All she had to do was reach for what wasn't hers. And I knew Lisa better than she knew herself. I knew her greed like I knew the criminal code. She wouldn't be able to help herself. She would reach out and grab, and the moment she did, the steel jaws of justice would snap shut on her forever. I walked back into my apartment at 4 in the afternoon. The air inside felt old and stale, heavy with the ghosts of the life I was about to leave behind forever. I didn't take off my coat or shoes. I wasn't planning to stay long enough to get comfortable. I was only there to give one final performance. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of tap water. I stood by the sink and looked out the window at the brick wall of the building next door. I took a deep breath. This had to be perfect. It had to be loud enough for her to hear, but private enough to sound like a secret conversation. I knew she was nearby somewhere. I didn't need to see her car parked outside. I didn't need to smell that strong flower perfume she always wore. I could feel her presence like you feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. She was probably in the hallway with her ear pressed against my wooden door, or maybe she had snuck into the empty apartment across the hall, which I knew she used as a listening post. I had seen the scratch marks on that lock. She was a creature of predictable habits, and her main habit was spying and surveillance. She wanted to know everything about my life, especially when I was going to die, so she could be the first person to find my bank book. Today I was going to give her something even better than a death announcement. I was going to give her a reason to risk absolutely everything she had. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. I dialed the number for the automated time and weather recording service. It was a safe, neutral background noise that I could pretend to talk over. I held the phone up to my ear and walked into the living room slowly. I positioned myself near the front door. Not too close, just close enough that my voice raised in frustration would carry through the cracks in the doorframe. I cleared my throat and let the act begin. I hunched my shoulders forward. I let a small shake enter my hands. I became the paranoid, confused old lady she wanted and expected me to be. "Listen to me, Mr. Henderson," I said loudly, my voice shaking with fake frustration and age. "I don't care about early withdrawal penalties or FDIC insurance regulations. I'm completely done with banks and banking. I saw it on the news. I know what's happening to the economy. It's crashing and burning, and I'm not going to let you people freeze all my money and assets." I paused deliberately, leaving empty space for an imaginary banker to protest and argue. I paced in a small, tight circle on my rug, letting my shoes make noise against the floor. I wanted her to hear the pacing. I wanted her to hear the anxiety and fear in my movements. "No," I shouted at the empty room. "No, you need to listen to me for once. I want to close out the high-yield savings account completely. Yes, the one I opened back in 2001. I want every single penny of it in cash. Don't you dare look at me like I'm crazy. I know exactly how much money is in there. $400,000. $400,000. I let that number hang in the air and sink in. $400,000. It was a huge amount of money that could change Lisa's entire life. It was a number that would pay off all her credit card debt, buy her a brand new car, and fuel her shopping addiction for years. It was the exact number I had calculated carefully. High enough to drive her completely insane with greed, but low enough to be believable for a woman who had worked as a detective for 30 years and saved carefully. I walked even closer to my front door. I stared hard at the brass doorknob, imagining her ear pressed against the wood on the other side, listening to every word. "I want all of it ready by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I'm moving the strongbox into my apartment tonight to keep it safe. Yes, the big black metal one with the combination lock. I'm going to keep it right here in my living room where I can see it at all times. I don't trust you bankers anymore. I don't trust the government. I'm taking MY money, and I'm guarding it myself in my own home." I listened to the automated voice droning on in my ear about the weather forecast. Partly cloudy with a 30% chance of rain. How fitting and appropriate. A storm was definitely on its way. I continued with my fake phone call performance. "I'll be at the bank at 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning. Have all the bills ready in $100 bills. And absolutely do not call my son Tommy about this. This is MY money that I earned. He doesn't need to know anything about it. He's too weak to handle money. His wife would just spend it all on stupid things and waste it. This is my retirement safety net." I hung up the phone with an angry, violent jab of my finger. I threw it onto the sofa cushion with force. I stood there breathing heavily, not from actual physical effort, but from the pure adrenaline rush of telling such a big, important lie. It was out there now, floating in the universe. The bait was in the water. The blood trail was laid out clearly. I moved quickly to my bookshelf. I pulled out my laptop computer and opened the secure video feed from the hidden camera I had installed in the hallway light fixture 3 days earlier. It was a fisheye lens that gave me a distorted but very clear view of the entire corridor outside apartment 3C. And there she was, exactly where I knew she would be. Lisa was standing pressed flat against the hallway wall right next to my door. She wasn't even trying to hide or be sneaky. Her head was tilted to one side. Her eyes were wide open and unblinking, staring at nothing. She looked like a drug addict who had just found a bag of pills on the sidewalk. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly. I could actually see the greed washing over her in physical waves. It was distorting her face, pulling her lips back from her teeth in an ugly expression. She yanked her phone out of her pocket with shaking hands. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing frantically fast. She was texting Tommy right at that very moment. I knew exactly what she was typing without even seeing the screen. She has $400,000 in cash. She's bringing it to the apartment tomorrow. We have to get it. This is our chance. She looked at my door one last time. Her hand reached out slowly, hovering over the doorknob like she was thinking about trying it. For one terrifying second, I thought she might try to break in right then and there, ruining my entire carefully planned trap. I tensed up, ready to confront her face to face and ruin the whole plan if I had to. But then she pulled her hand back quickly. She was greedy and desperate, yes, but she wasn't completely stupid. She understood that she couldn't steal a safe that wasn't physically there yet. She knew she had to wait patiently for the money to actually arrive first before she could take it. She spun around and literally ran down the hallway toward the stairwell. She moved with a speed and energy I had never seen in her before. She was motivated and energized now. She had a clear purpose and goal. She wasn't just checking on a senile old woman anymore. She was planning an actual heist and robbery. I closed my laptop computer. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It's one thing to suspect in your mind that your family members are greedy and mercenary. It's a completely different thing to actually watch them salivate over your imaginary fortune like hungry wolves circling an injured deer in the forest. She hadn't hesitated for even 1 second. She hadn't stopped to think about my safety. She hadn't worried that carrying that much cash around might put me in danger. She only saw the money. She only saw the payday. I went into my bedroom and carefully packed the last few personal items into my small rolling suitcase. My toothbrush, my hairbrush, a framed photo of Mom smiling, the evidence notebook where I had recorded all of Lisa's crimes in detail. I looked around the apartment one final time. It was completely stripped bare of anything personal or meaningful. It looked cold and empty. It looked exactly like a storage warehouse. I walked back to the living room. I stared at the spot on the floor where the strongbox would sit tomorrow. The heavy industrial bolts I had purchased were sitting on the table, ready to be used. The power drill was fully charged and waiting. Tomorrow morning, professional movers would bring the heavy metal box up in the freight elevator. I would bolt it down to the floor joists so firmly it would take a construction crew to remove it. I would fill it with the fake files and tracking device. And then I would disappear upstairs to the penthouse like a ghost, leaving behind the perfect trap. I checked the camera video feed on my laptop one more time. The hallway was completely empty now, but I knew she was out there somewhere in the city. She was probably sitting in her car yelling at Tommy on the phone, telling him that their lottery ticket had finally come in and they were about to be rich. She was probably already calculating in her head how to spend the money before she had even stolen it. I put on my coat and picked up my suitcase handle. I walked to the front door and unlocked all the locks. I stepped out into the hallway and locked the door securely behind me. The click of the deadbolt sliding home sounded so final and permanent. I didn't take the regular elevator. I walked up the stairs instead, step by step, 1 flight, then 2 flights, then 3. I needed to feel the burn in my leg muscles. I needed to remember that I was still strong and capable. By the time I finally reached the 6th floor, I was breathing hard from the exertion, but I felt clean and pure inside. I used my special key to enter the private elevator lobby of the penthouse apartment. The doors slid open smoothly, revealing a completely different world of polished marble floors and sparkling glass and absolute silence. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the city spread out far below me. Somewhere down there in that maze of streets and buildings, Lisa was plotting and scheming. She was making her plans. She was probably buying tools at the hardware store. "Let her come," I whispered quietly to my reflection in the glass window. I poured myself a small glass of expensive wine that I had been saving for a special occasion. I sat down in the comfortable chair facing the wall of security monitors I had set up. One screen clearly showed the hallway outside apartment 3C. Another screen showed the interior of the empty living room. The trap was fully armed and ready. The bait was perfectly positioned. I took a slow sip of the wine. It had a pleasant warmth going down my throat. I thought about the fake phone call I had just performed. I thought about the elaborate lie I had told. $400,000 in cash. It was a lot of money to most normal people. But the lesson I was about to teach Lisa was going to cost her so much more than any amount of dollars. It was going to cost her freedom. It was going to cost her future. I watched the empty hallway on the security monitor screen. The stage was perfectly set for the final act of this drama. I settled back comfortably in my chair to wait and watch. Spiders don't actively hunt flies. Spiders weave perfect webs and then wait patiently for flies to destroy themselves. And Lisa was flying at full speed straight toward the center of my web. The professional movers arrived at exactly 4:45 in the morning while it was still dark outside. These weren't young college students you hire with pizza and $20 bills to move a couch. These were experienced men on the official payroll of Hayes Property Holdings. They wore plain gray coveralls with absolutely no company logos or names. They moved with the silent, smooth efficiency of a military tactical team. They knew me only as the boss. They didn't ask why I was living in a run-down one-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling. They didn't question why I needed a heavy metal strongbox bolted permanently to the floor of a room I was moving out of. They simply did their job professionally without asking questions. I stood in the corner of the living room sipping my last cup of coffee from the cheap coffee maker I had bought at a thrift store years ago. I watched them carefully wheel the strongbox inside on a heavy-duty dolly. It was an absolute beast of a box. An antique from the 1940s. Black painted iron with brass corner reinforcements and a big combination dial. It weighed close to 600 pounds. It looked like it belonged in an old bank vault or a black-and-white detective movie. It looked like it held incredibly valuable secrets and treasures. Center of the room, I directed them clearly. Bolted directly through the subfloor into the wooden joists below. I want it completely immovable. One of the workers pulled out a heavy-duty industrial impact drill. The sound of the long bolts driving deep into the subfloor was a violent mechanical scream that vibrated through the soles of my shoes and into my bones. It was the sound of a cage door locking shut permanently. When they finally finished their work, the strongbox sat there in the middle of the empty room like an ancient monument. It dominated the entire empty space. It screamed valuable and important to anyone who saw it. I walked over to it slowly. I spun the combination dial. The internal tumblers clicked with a satisfying mechanical precision that spoke of quality engineering. I pulled open the heavy door. The interior smelled strongly of machine oil and cold metal. I reached into my leather briefcase and carefully pulled out the bait I had prepared. First, I placed the fake financial ledgers inside. They were thick books bound in leather, filled with endless rows of meaningless numbers that looked incredibly official and important to anyone who wasn't trained to read them. I stacked them neatly in order. Then I placed the small black tracking device in the back corner of the safe. Hidden behind the books, the GPS tracker was already active and working. It was blinking a slow, steady red light. If this strongbox moved even one single inch from this spot, I would know about it immediately on my phone. Finally, I placed the manila folder on top of everything else. Estate of Margaret Hayes. Confidential financial information. Inside was a single sheet of white paper showing just one thing: my actual bank account balance. Just the total number at the bottom, not the account numbers or any other details. It was the cheese in the mousetrap, the worm on the fishing hook. I closed the heavy door firmly. I spun the combination dial to lock it. Next came the official warning signage. Susan had sent them over by courier late last night. These weren't handwritten notes on notebook paper. They were official laminated signs mandated by federal law for secure document storage facilities. I carefully taped the first large sign to the front of the strongbox where it couldn't be missed. Warning: restricted access. Federal business records. Property of Hayes Holdings Archives. I taped the second sign to the inside of the apartment's front door at exact eye level where anyone entering would see it immediately. No trespassing. Authorized personnel only. Violators will be prosecuted under Federal Law Title 18. It completely changed the feeling of the entire room. With all the furniture gone and the strongbox sitting there in the stark early morning light coming through the dirty window, the apartment no longer looked like anyone's home. It looked like a secure facility. It looked like a place where dangerous secrets went to be locked away. The movers efficiently cleared out the rest of my fake life. The sagging old sofa, the scratched dining table that wobbled, the boxes of old clothes I never actually wore. They carried everything down in the freight elevator to the disposal truck waiting in the alley. I didn't feel even a tiny pang of sadness or nostalgia. I felt like a snake finally shedding dry, itchy old skin that didn't fit anymore. I took one very last look around the empty apartment. Dust particles danced and floated in the single shaft of light coming through the smudged window. I could see the scuff marks on the wooden floor where Lisa had paced back and forth. I could see the scratches on the lock where she had picked it. This apartment had been my prison cell for almost 3 years. A prison I had built myself, designed specifically to test the character and honesty of my son and his wife. They had both failed the test completely. Now it was transformed into an execution chamber for their greed. I walked out into the hallway and locked the door for the last time. I didn't hide a spare key under the doormat. I didn't give one to the building superintendent. I put the only key deep in my coat pocket. I walked down the hall to the service elevator. The movers held the door open politely for me. One of them pressed his special security key card against the sensor panel. A button lit up that no other regular tenant in the entire building could access. For penthouse. The elevator began to rise smoothly. It bypassed the second floor, the third, the fourth. My ears popped from the change in air pressure. The vibration of the steel cables was a low, steady hum. I was ascending physically and metaphorically. I was leaving behind the underworld where I had played the role of Margaret the poor pensioner, and rising up to the mountaintop where I could be Margaret the property owner again. The elevator doors finally slid open directly into the private foyer of the penthouse apartment. The transition was absolutely jarring and dramatic. Downstairs, the air had smelled like old boiled vegetables and stale carpet. Up here, the air was filtered and purified, scented lightly with expensive candles. My shoes made a sharp clicking sound on genuine Italian marble tile. The quality of light was completely different up here. It was brighter, clearer, more pure. I walked into the main living area slowly, taking it all in. It was a space made entirely of floor-to-ceiling glass windows and polished steel and expensive minimalist furniture. A beautiful grand piano sat untouched in the corner, its black surface gleaming. I walked over to the massive wall of windows that offered a complete 180-degree view of the entire city. From up here, the city looked like an organized circuit board, logical and controllable and orderly. I went into my private study and sat down at the command center I had carefully set up the day before. A wall of 6 high-definition security monitors glowed with a cool blue light. I sat in the expensive ergonomic chair and typed in my security passcodes. Screen 1 showed a crystal-clear view of the hallway outside apartment 3C down on the 3rd floor. It was completely empty and silent. The door to 3C stood closed and locked. Screen 2 showed the interior of 3C in perfect detail. The strongbox sat there in the center of the empty room, brooding and mysterious. The infrared camera made it glow with a ghostly heat signature against the cool floor. I was now the all-seeing eye in the sky. I was like a god looking down on my creation from above. And I was waiting patiently for the sinners to arrive and fall into my trap. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. It was time to cut the very last tie that connected me to my old life. It was time to give them the green light to proceed. I composed a text message to Tommy. I kept it short and simple. I kept it sounding pathetic and confused. Tommy, I can't stay here in the city anymore. Everything is too loud and confusing. I'm moving to the countryside to stay with cousin Linda. Please don't come looking for me. I need to be alone to think clearly. The apartment is empty now. I left the spare key inside on the kitchen counter. Goodbye forever. Press send. I watched the screen. Waited. Cousin Linda. That was my mother's cousin. She had died from pneumonia in 2004. Tommy had been at her funeral. He was 15 years old and had helped carry flowers. If Tommy actually cared about me at all, if he knew anything real about my life or my family history, he would immediately know that Cousin Linda was dead and had been for years. He would know I was either lying to him or having a complete mental breakdown and hallucinating. He would immediately call the police. He would call hospitals and ask if I had been admitted. He would panic because his mother was claiming to live with a person who had been dead for decades. I stared at my phone screen intensely. 1 long minute passed slowly, then 2 minutes, then 3. Finally, the reply text came through. Okay, Mom. Whatever you think is best. Be safe out there. He didn't remember Cousin Linda. Or maybe he did remember but simply didn't care enough to question it. He just saw an obstacle removing itself from his path. He just saw an apartment sitting empty and unguarded, ready to be robbed. I placed my phone down on the glass desk. The notification vibration had barely stopped when I saw movement on security monitor number 1. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, right on schedule. The elevator doors on the 3rd floor slid open. Lisa stepped out fast. She wasn't walking normally. She was practically running down the hallway. She was wearing athletic clothes and a hoodie pulled up over her head to partially hide her face. She kept looking over her shoulder nervously. She looked directly at my old apartment door. Tommy stumbled out of the elevator behind her a few seconds later. He looked pale and sick, like he might throw up. She had received my text message. She knew I claimed to be gone. She thought the apartment was completely empty and unguarded. She thought $400,000 in cash was sitting there just waiting for her to take it. I leaned forward in my chair 40 floors directly above them. I took a slow sip of the fresh espresso that my expensive automatic coffee machine had just brewed perfectly. Tasted bitter and hot and victorious. Go ahead, Lisa, I whispered to the glowing screen. Try the door. See what happens. She didn't knock politely. She didn't call out my name to check if I was really gone. She reached deep into her pocket and pulled out a key. A key she absolutely should not have. A duplicate copy of a copy. She jammed it roughly into the lock. She twisted it hard. It didn't turn at all. I had changed the entire lock cylinder just 3 hours ago while it was still dark. On the monitor screen, I watched her face twist and contort with frustration and rage. She rattled the door handle violently back and forth. She kicked the door hard with her foot. She spun around to face Tommy and screamed something I couldn't hear clearly through the camera, but I could read her lips perfectly. She changed the locks. That crazy old bat changed the damn locks. Tommy put both hands on top of his head in a gesture of defeat and despair. He wanted to leave immediately. He wanted to go home and forget this whole thing. But Lisa wasn't going anywhere. She stared at that locked door like she could burn a hole through the solid wood with the pure force of her rage and desire. She pulled out her phone and started typing frantically, searching for something. She wasn't texting me. She was looking up locksmiths who would come do illegal work for cash. I sat back comfortably in my chair. The first chess piece had been moved across the board. The attacking knight was now blocked and trapped. Now she would be forced to get creative and desperate. Now she would be forced to break the law in a way that absolutely could not be explained away as just checking on family. I watched her pace the hallway like a caged wild animal looking for any weakness in the bars. I watched my son lean against the wall, completely defeated by his own weakness and lack of courage. "Welcome to the penthouse view, Tommy," I said quietly to the screen. "It's a very long way down from here to rock bottom." I sat perfectly still in the ergonomic leather chair of my command center, 40 floors above the street below. The coffee in my expensive mug was exactly the right temperature. The silence in the penthouse was absolute and complete. It was the kind of silence that money buys. The kind of silence that completely insulates you from the desperate scratching of creatures far below. On the central security monitor, the live feed from the hallway camera on the third floor played out in crystal-clear high definition. It was exactly like watching a nature documentary about scavengers fighting desperately over a dead carcass, except the carcass was my life savings and the scavengers were supposed to be my family. Lisa was vibrating with barely contained energy. That's the only accurate word to describe it. She stood directly in front of door 3C with both hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. The key that had failed to open the new lock was still gripped in her hand. She stared at the lock mechanism like it was a personal insult to her. She looked closely at the brushed steel faceplate of the brand new deadbolt I had installed. It was a high-security lock, drill-resistant and pick-resistant. It was a lock that clearly said, "Absolutely not." She spun around to face Tommy. On the screen, I could see actual spit flying from her mouth as she screamed at him. The audio feed was working perfectly, picking up every single syllable of her rage. "Do something useful for once, Tommy," she shrieked at the top of her lungs. "Don't just stand there like a useless statue made of stone. Break it down. Kick the door in." 00:58:28. Tommy looked at the heavy door. He looked at his angry wife. He looked completely exhausted and defeated. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy boulder uphill for 10 years straight and had just been told he was only halfway to the summit. "I can't kick it in, Lisa," he said, his voice flat and completely hopeless. "Just look at it carefully. It's solid wood with a steel reinforcement frame. Mom must have had it specially reinforced. She told me last month she was worried about break-ins and security." Lisa let out a harsh laugh. It was a sound that scraped painfully against the sensitive microphone. "Security? Are you kidding me? She's a paranoid, crazy old woman who thinks the government is coming to steal her imaginary millions. She probably can't even remember how to use a key properly anymore. She's probably inside right now counting her pills and drooling on herself." She pounded her fist hard against the wood. "Margaret, open this door right now. It's Lisa. We know you're in there hiding." Of course, there was only silence from inside the apartment. It was completely empty except for the strongbox. The safe was the only occupant, silently broadcasting its exact GPS location to my computer server upstairs. Lisa turned back to the stubborn lock. She grabbed the door handle with both hands and rattled it violently, throwing her entire body weight against the door repeatedly. It didn't budge even a single millimeter. "He texted you," she hissed at Tommy through clenched teeth. "Your mother texted and said the apartment was empty and the key was inside. Why would she bother changing the lock if she was really leaving forever? None of this makes any sense." Tommy slid down the wall until he was crouching low on his heels. He put his head in both hands and looked completely broken. "Maybe she actually took the money with her, Lisa. Maybe there is no money at all. Maybe she just finally snapped mentally and left town." Megan rounded on him furiously. She loomed over his crouched figure, her shadow falling across his defeated posture. "Don't be stupid," she spat the words at him. "You heard her on that phone call yesterday. $400,000 in cash. I saw the delivery truck this morning with my own eyes, Tommy. I watched them wheel a massive steel strongbox into this building at 5 a.m. She can't move something that heavy by herself. She can't carry $400,000 in a suitcase without having a heart attack and dying. It's in there right now. It's sitting on the floor waiting for us, and you're going to help me get it." Tommy looked up at her with red, tired eyes. "This is completely wrong, Lisa. If she really moved out, we should just leave everything alone. We can't break into her apartment. That's burglary. That's a serious crime." Lisa crouched down until her face was just inches from his. I zoomed the camera in closer. I wanted to see if there was any love at all in her eyes. There was absolutely none. There was only cold calculation. "We have $85,000 in credit card debt, Tommy. They're going to repossess our car next week. We're 4 months behind on rent. The landlord sent an eviction notice. If we don't get that money right now, we're going to be homeless and living on the street. Do you understand what I'm saying? We'll have nothing. Your mother owes us this money. She's been hoarding wealth while we literally starve. She's been sitting on a fortune while you work yourself to death for minimum wage. It's not burglary or theft. It's just taking an advance on your inheritance early. That's all. I took another sip of my coffee. Work himself to death. Tommy worked maybe 15 hours a week as a freelance handyman, which mostly involved watching TV and waiting for me to send him money every month. But in Lisa's twisted narrative, they were the victims. They were the martyrs suffering unfairly. Tommy shook his head weakly. She's not dead yet, Lisa. There is no inheritance to take. Lisa stood up fast and smoothed down her athletic clothes. Her face settled into a cold mask of absolute determination. She might as well be dead already. She's moving to the country to die with a ghost from the past. She abandoned this place and everything in it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Tommy. If we get inside and find the cash, it belongs to us legally. Nobody else knows it exists. She told the bank not to call you. She hid it from the government and taxes. It's completely untraceable. It's ghost money, and we're going to take it tonight. She pulled out her phone again and started scrolling frantically through search results. I called a locksmith an hour ago. He said he wouldn't touch it without proof that we own the apartment. Coward! She paced the length of the hallway rapidly. 3 steps one direction, 3 steps back. She was exactly like a tiger in a zoo, pacing along the fence line, desperately looking for any weakness in the wire. She stopped directly in front of the door again. She ran her hand slowly over the door frame, searching for a hidden key or searching for loose hinges she could exploit. Nothing. We need tools, she announced suddenly. Tommy looked up. What kind of tools? We need a crowbar, a really heavy one, and bolt cutters, and maybe a power drill. If we can't pick the lock professionally, we'll destroy it completely. We come back late tonight when the building is totally quiet and the doorman is asleep. We break in fast, grab the money, and disappear. Tommy stood up slowly. He looked absolutely terrified. Lisa, no. That's breaking and entering. That's a felony crime. If we get caught, if we don't get that money, my entire life is over. She screamed it so loud her voice cracked and broke. For just 1 second, I could see the real fear hiding behind all the greed. She was truly desperate. She had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies and overspending, and now it was collapsing. She needed that money not just to buy nice things but just to breathe and survive. She grabbed Tommy by the front of his jacket and physically shoved him hard against the wall. You're going to help me do this. You're going to drive me to the hardware store. You're going to buy the tools we need. And tonight you're going to stand guard outside while I get what belongs to us by right. Or I swear to God, Tommy, I will leave you forever. I will walk away and leave you with all the debt and all the shame, and you will never see me again. Tommy stared at her silently. I watched my son weighing his morality against his fear of being alone. I watched him weighing loyalty to his mother against his wife. It wasn't even close to a fair contest. The scale tipped instantly and completely. His shoulders sagged in defeat. All the fight went out of him. Okay, he whispered quietly. Okay, we'll go to the store and get tools. Lisa released him from her grip. She patted his cheek. It was a gesture of ownership, not affection or love. Good boy. Now let's go. We have work to do. She turned and marched toward the elevator without even looking back to see if he was following. Tommy stayed behind for just a moment longer. He looked at the door of apartment 3C1 last time. He reached out and touched the wood gently, almost lovingly. I'm sorry, Mom. He whispered so quietly I almost couldn't hear it. Then he turned around and followed Lisa like an obedient dog. I watched them get into the elevator together. I watched the doors close on both their faces. I sat in the complete silence of my penthouse and felt a profound emptiness in my chest. He had apologized. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew he was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. And he was going to do it anyway. He was sorry, but he was still going to bring the crowbar and help her. I turned off the hallway monitor and switched the main screen to show the interior of apartment 3C. The strongbox sat there in the darkness, its tiny red GPS tracking light blinking slowly and steadily like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was waiting patiently for them. The bait was set perfectly. The trap was primed and ready. They were going to the hardware store right now to buy the exact instruments of their own destruction. I picked up my phone and dialed Susan's private number. "They just left," I said calmly. "They're going to buy tools. They're coming back tonight to break in. Tell Captain Rodriguez to have his team ready and in position by 2 a.m. Susan didn't ask me how I knew all this. She knew I was watching everything. "Is Tommy with her?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I answered. "He's driving the car and going to help her." There was a long pause on the phone line. "I'm sorry, Maggie. This must be hard." "Don't be sorry," I replied, closing my eyes for just a brief second. "He just signed his resignation letter from this family. Let's make sure the severance package is delivered promptly and completely." Hung up the phone. I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city far below was waking up for the day. Millions of people going about their normal lives, earning their money honestly, making their choices. Down there somewhere in that vast city, my son and his wife were buying a pry bar and bolt cutters. They thought they were preparing for the heist of a lifetime. They had no idea they were actually preparing for their own arrest. I would be ready and waiting. I would be watching every single move. And when they finally broke that seal and touched that strongbox, they would discover that the only thing inside was the truth. And the truth, as people always say, will set you free. But first it's going to put you in handcuffs. The sun began to sink slowly behind the steel canyons of the city, casting long purple and orange shadows across the marble floor of the penthouse. I sat in the growing darkness, lit only by the cool blue glow of the monitor array. I had not moved from this chair for many hours. I was a silent sentinel. I was a ghost haunting my own building from above. The silence up here was profound and peaceful, but on the screens, the drama was playing out in grainy real time. At 5:45 p.m., Lisa played her last card before resorting to violence. She returned to the third-floor hallway, but not with a crowbar. She came with a man wearing greasy coveralls and carrying a heavy tool bag. A locksmith, but definitely not a reputable licensed one. I ran a quick internet search on the logo on his dirty shirt. Eddie's 24-hour emergency unlock service. 1-star reviews online. Known for overcharging desperate customers and asking absolutely zero questions about legality. Perfect for Lisa's purposes. I zoomed in the camera. I watched them argue intensely in the hallway. Lisa was gesturing wildly with her hands, pointing at the door repeatedly. She was spinning an elaborate lie I could almost hear through the screen even without audio. "My elderly mother is very sick inside. She locked herself in and lost the key. We're worried she might have fallen." The locksmith looked bored and unimpressed. He knelt down to inspect the lock closely. I leaned forward. This was the real test of my expensive hardware. I had installed a top-of-the-line Medeco high-security deadbolt. It's the exact kind of lock they use on embassy buildings. It's completely pick-resistant, drill-resistant, and terrifying to amateur criminals. The locksmith took one long look at the unusual keyway. He ran his thumb over the hardened steel faceplate. He stood up and shook his head firmly. I saw him mouth the words, "Can't do it." "Sorry." Lisa grabbed his arm desperately. She pulled a thick wad of cash from her purse. It was probably my money, withdrawn from an ATM using the very last of her credit limit. She tried to shove the bills into his shirt pocket. The locksmith backed away quickly. He pointed directly at the security camera mounted in the ceiling light fixture. He had spotted it immediately. He wasn't stupid or reckless. He knew a commercial-grade security setup when he saw one. He knew that breaking into a unit secured like Fort Knox wasn't worth any amount of cash. It was a trap. He picked up his heavy tool bag and walked straight to the elevator, leaving Lisa standing there alone with a fistful of cash and a face twisted in impotent rage and frustration. She kicked the door hard. She kicked it so hard I thought she might actually break her toe. Then she turned to Tommy, who was leaning against the opposite wall looking like a man waiting for a firing squad to shoot him. She screamed something at him. He nodded weakly. They got into the elevator together. The diplomatic phase was officially over. Now came the brute force. 2 hours later they returned. This time they were definitely not empty-handed. I watched them struggle to wrestle a long, heavy package wrapped in brown paper out of the elevator and into the hallway. The shape was completely unmistakable. A 36-inch wrecking bar. A tool specifically designed for demolition. A tool designed to tear wood from frames and rip steel from concrete. Tommy was carrying a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. They looked enormous and unwieldy in his hands. He looked like a child playing soldier with real deadly weapons he didn't understand. They didn't go directly to my door. They went into the vacant apartment across the hall. I had deliberately left it unlocked, knowing they were using it as a staging ground and hiding place. They were going to wait. They were going to wait until the building was asleep, until the night doorman took his break, until they thought the whole world wasn't watching. Picked up my phone. It was time to make the final call. I dialed a private number that very few people had. Rang twice. "Chief Rodriguez," I said formally. "Margaret." The voice on the other end was like gravel and cigarette smoke mixed together. "Antonio Rodriguez, chief of police for this precinct. We had worked together on cases for 15 years before I retired. He was a good man who had seen too much evil in the world. I haven't heard from you in over a year, Detective Hayes. Is everything all right?" I looked at the monitor showing the wrecking bar leaning against the wall in the vacant apartment across the hall. "No, Antonio, everything is not all right. But it's about to be fixed. I have a situation developing at the Forest Glen apartment building." I told him absolutely everything. I didn't exaggerate or add drama. I gave him just the facts, exactly like I used to give the district attorney clean evidence. I told him about the 36 break-ins over 3 months. I told him about the identity theft. I told him about the strongbox and the trap I had set. I told him that in just a few hours, 2 suspects were going to attempt forcible entry into a unit officially designated as a secure corporate archive facility. Antonio listened carefully. He didn't interrupt even once. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the line. "Your own son, Margaret?" he asked with deep sadness in his voice. "My own son," I confirmed quietly. "He's driving the getaway car, Antonio. He's holding the bolt cutters. He made his choice." I heard the scratch of a match being lit and the long exhale of cigarette smoke. Antonio was thinking hard. "If I send a tactical team in there, Margaret, we're talking about felony charges. We're talking about armed burglary if they're carrying a crowbar. That's legally considered a weapon. Once the handcuffs go on, I can't take them off just because you change your mind and get cold feet. The district attorney will prosecute this case hard. It's too clean to ignore." I looked at the image of Tommy on the screen. He was sitting on the floor of the vacant unit, staring at the wall with empty eyes. He looked lost and broken, but he was still there. He had made his choice freely. "I won't get cold feet, Antonio. I want them caught in the act. I want them physically inside the unit with their hands on the strongbox. I want the charges to stick so hard they'll need a jackhammer to get them off." "All right," Antonio said. "I'll send a tactical unit. No sirens. We'll come in silent. We'll secure the perimeter at 1 a.m. When do you think they'll actually move?" 2 a.m., I said with certainty. "That's when the night shift doorman takes his lunch break. She knows the schedule. She watches everything like a hawk. 2 a.m. it is. I'll be there personally, Margaret. I want to see this myself." "Thank you, Antonio." "Don't thank me. You're doing the hard part. I'm just taking out the trash." Hung up the phone. The sun was completely gone now. The city outside my window was a perfect grid of electric lights. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was observing a train wreck happening in slow motion. I had laid the tracks carefully. I had built the engine. But they were the ones shoveling coal into the fire. I watched the monitor screen for many more hours. They sat in the darkness across the hall from my old apartment. They ate gas station sandwiches. They argued in frantic whispers. I could see Lisa pacing again and again. She was extremely agitated. She was checking her watch compulsively every few minutes. She was fueled by a toxic mixture of adrenaline and pure greed. She was thinking about the money constantly. She was spending it in her imagination. $400,000. It was enough to fix everything wrong in her life. It was enough to bury all the mistakes. She didn't know that the only thing she was going to find in that strongbox was a mirror showing her own greed. At 1:30 in the morning, I saw movement on the street far below my window. 2 unmarked black vans pulled up silently to the service entrance in the back alley. Men in dark tactical uniforms stepped out quietly. They moved like shadows. Antonio's team. They were entering through the back stairwell. They were moving into position. My heart began to beat just a little bit faster. Not from fear, but from the finality of it all. This was it. The absolute point of no return. I switched the audio feed on. I wanted to hear their voices. I wanted to hear how they justified this to themselves. Lisa stood up suddenly. She picked up the heavy crowbar. She tested its weight in her hands. "It's time," she whispered. Tommy stood up slowly. He picked up the bolt cutters with shaking hands. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Lisa," he said weakly, "we can still just go. We can just drive away right now and forget this." Lisa turned on him with eyes that were like black holes in the night vision camera. "And go where, Tommy?" "To the homeless shelter. To bankruptcy court." "Well, we're going into that room. We're getting that money. And tomorrow morning we're going to be rich and safe. Now move." She pushed him roughly toward the door. I sat back in my chair. I took a deep breath. "Come on in, Lisa," I said to the empty penthouse room. "The bank vault is open and waiting for you." The digital clock on my wall flipped to 2 a.m. It was the hour of the wolf. The hour when good people are asleep and desperate people make mistakes that define the rest of their entire lives. On the monitor, the hallway was bathed in the strange green light of the night vision camera. The door to the vacant unit across the hall opened very slowly. It wasn't a stealthy movement. It was the heavy, reluctant push of a man who knew he was walking straight toward a cliff edge. Lisa stepped out first. She wore black gloves, the cheap kind you buy in a multipack at a gas station. In her right hand, she gripped the wrecking bar tightly. It was a cold piece of hexagonal steel, 36 inches long, heavy enough to kill a person or pry a building off its foundation. She moved with jerky, frantic energy. Her head snapped left, then right, checking for witnesses. There was no one visible. Just the silent lens of my camera watching her every nervous twitch. Tommy followed behind her. He carried the bolt cutters across his chest like a soldier carries a rifle. He was sweating heavily. I could see the sheen on his forehead even in the low light. He looked directly at the camera in the ceiling. For one brief second, our eyes met across the digital divide. He couldn't see me, but I could see him perfectly. I saw the child I had taught to ride a bicycle. I saw the boy who cried when his goldfish died. Now he was a man about to commit a serious felony because he was too terrified to say no to his wife. They reached my door. Lisa didn't hesitate for even 1 second. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She jammed the flat end of the wrecking bar into the narrow gap between the door and the frame. The sound was a sharp metallic screech that must have echoed like a gunshot in the silent hallway. She leaned all her body weight into it. The wood groaned in protest. It was a dry, high-pitched sound of structural failure. The Medico lock I had installed was a masterpiece of German engineering. It would not pick. It would not drill. But any lock is only as strong as the wood it's bolted into. Lisa wasn't attacking the lock directly. She was attacking the architecture around it. She grunted, a raw animal sound of pure effort. She put her boot flat against the wall for better leverage and pulled with all her strength. Crack. The sound came through my speakers, crisp and violent. The door frame splintered. A large piece of decorative trim flew off and hit the opposite wall. The deadbolt held firmly to the metal strike plate, but the wood surrounding the strike plate tore completely away. The door popped open with a shuddering bang, swinging inward into the pitch-black darkness of apartment 3C. They both froze immediately. They stood in the doorway breathing hard, waiting for a shout or alarm. There was only heavy silence. The apartment was a black mouth waiting to swallow them whole. "Go!" Lisa hissed urgently. They stepped across the threshold together. Instantly, a red banner flashed across my monitor screen. Silent alarm activated. Priority 1. Dispatch notified. There was no siren blaring in the apartment. No flashing lights. That was the beauty of a commercial-grade silent alarm system. It gave the intruder a completely false sense of security. It let them get deep inside the crime scene. It let them get comfortable and complacent. It ensured that when police arrived, the suspects wouldn't be running away. They would be standing right in the center of the crime scene, literally holding the evidence in their hands. I switched the camera view to the interior of the living room. The infrared sensors painted the room in sharp shades of gray and white. I saw the thin beams of their flashlights cutting through the darkness wildly. They swept across the empty walls, the bare floor, the dust particles dancing in the air. "Where's all the furniture?" Brandon whispered. His voice was trembling badly. "It's completely empty, Lisa." She really did move out. She did not move out. Lisa snapped back angrily. Her flashlight beam slashed across the room. "She's hiding. She's playing mind games with us. Look for the..." Her light hit the center of the room and stopped dead. The beam illuminated the strongbox perfectly. It stood there anchored to the floor, black and imposing, a monolith of steel and secrets. It looked absolutely immovable. It looked like it contained the wealth of small nations. Lisa let out a sound that was half gasp, half moan. It was the exact sound an addict makes when finding their drug. She actually ran to it. She didn't walk. She ran across the empty room. She dropped the crowbar on the floor with a loud clang that vibrated through the room. She fell to her knees in front of the strongbox like she was praying. She ran her gloved hands over the cold metal surface. She touched the combination dial. She touched the handle. "Jackpot," she whispered, her voice trembling with manic euphoria. "It's here. It's really here. $400,000. Tommy approached more slowly. His flashlight beam wavered and shook. It swept over the front of the strongbox and illuminated the bright red laminated sign I had taped there just hours ago. "Warning. Restricted access. Federal tax records. Property of Hayes Holdings Archives." "Lisa," Tommy said, his voice tight with real fear now. "Look at the sign. It says Federal Records. It says Hayes Holdings. This isn't Mom's personal safe. This looks like commercial property." Lisa ripped the sign off violently. She tore it in half and threw both pieces over her shoulder. The paper fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. "It's a decoy," she spat. "It's a trick, Tommy. She put that there to scare us off. She wants us to think it's official so we don't touch it. It's just a scarecrow. The money is inside. I know it. I can feel it in my bones." She grabbed the handle and yanked it hard. Of course it was locked. "Give me the drill," she ordered. She held out her hand without looking at him. Tommy didn't move. He was shining his light around the room now, seeing all the other signs I had posted on the walls. "No trespassing. Authorized personnel only." "This feels really wrong, Lisa. Why is the apartment completely empty? Why are there so many official signs? This is a setup. We need to leave right now." Lisa stood up fast. She turned her flashlight directly on him, blinding him. "We are not leaving. We're drilling this lock open. We're taking that money. And we're going to live the life we deserve. Give me the damn drill now." Tommy lowered his head in defeat. He reached into the bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a heavy-duty cordless drill with a sharp carbide bit. He handed it to her with shaking hands. Lisa took it eagerly. She turned back to the strongbox. The high whine of the drill motor filled the entire room. It was a high-pitched mechanical scream that drowned out every sound of reason and common sense. She pressed the spinning bit hard against the steel near the dial. She leaned all her weight into it. She was attacking the safe with feral intensity. Bright sparks flew as the metal bits scraped against the hardened casing. I watched from my tower high above. I took a slow sip of my wine. She was drilling into a decoy safe in a room she had broken into while police were silently surrounding the entire building. She thought she was minutes away from being rich. She was actually seconds away from being arrested. She pushed harder. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly greed. She didn't look human anymore. She looked like a creature consumed by hunger. She didn't hear the elevator doors opening down the hall. She didn't hear the soft tread of tactical boots on carpet. She only heard the drill. She only saw the money she imagined was inside. I checked the hallway monitor. 6 police officers in full body armor were stacking up in formation outside my door. One held a tactical battering ram. Another held a ballistic shield. Chief Rodriguez was at the back of the formation. His service weapon drawn but pointed safely at the floor. They waited. They were waiting for my signal. Or maybe they were just enjoying watching the show. Lisa stopped drilling suddenly. She wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. "Almost there," she panted. "I can feel it giving way." She revved the drill again. The sound rose to a crescendo of entitlement and stupidity. I leaned forward and pressed the button on my control console that controlled all the lights in Unit 3C. It was time to bring them into the light. The lights in Unit 3C didn't flicker on gradually. They slammed on. I had installed high-intensity commercial halogen work lights in all 4 ceiling corners, wired to a central switch up here in the penthouse. 1 second, the room was a dark cave illuminated only by weak flashlight beams. The next second it was brighter than an operating room. Lisa screamed. It was pure reflex. A sharp intake of breath followed by a shriek as her pupils contracted violently against the blinding glare. She dropped the drill. It clattered loudly against the strongbox, bouncing off the steel door and spinning across the hardwood floor. She threw both hands up to cover her eyes, stumbling backward blindly. Tommy didn't scream. He simply froze completely. He stood there like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck barreling toward it. His mouth hung open. His hands still clutched the useless flashlight. Then came the voice. "Police! Get on the ground now." The voice was amplified through a megaphone, booming from the hallway. It wasn't a polite request. It was a command that vibrated in your chest cavity. The splintered door was kicked wide open with tremendous force, hitting the wall and cracking the plaster. 6 figures in black tactical gear poured into the room like a flood. They moved with terrifying synchronized precision. Weapons were raised and aimed. Voices shouted, overlapping, creating a wall of noise designed to disorient and subdue. "Hands! Let me see your hands. Drop the weapon. On the ground." Lisa was still holding the crowbar in her left hand, forgotten in her panic. To the officers storming the room, she wasn't a daughter-in-law looking for inheritance money. She was an armed suspect standing over a drilled safe in a commercial archive facility. "Drop it or we will fire." A red laser dot appeared on Lisa's chest, right over her heart. She looked down at it. Her brain finally caught up to the reality of the situation. She dropped the crowbar. It hit the floor with a heavy, final clang. She raised her hands slowly, her face a mask of absolute terror. "On your knees. Cross your ankles. Do not move." 2 officers were on her within seconds. One kicked her legs out from under her. She hit the floor hard, her face pressing against the dust. A knee was pressed firmly into her back, pinning her down. Her arms were wrenched roughly behind her. The sound of zip-tie restraints zipping tight was loud in the sudden silence. You're hurting me, Lisa wailed. Her voice was muffled against the floorboards. I didn't do anything. This is my mother-in-law's apartment. She gave me a key. Liar, I whispered from my tower. Tommy had collapsed immediately. He hadn't waited to be tackled. He had dropped to his knees the instant the first officer entered. He was curled into a tight ball, his hands laced behind his head, shaking so violently his teeth were chattering. Don't shoot. Please don't shoot, he sobbed. I didn't want to do it. She made me. It was all her idea. Shut up, Tommy. Lisa screamed from the floor, twisting her head to glare at him with venomous eyes. Shut your mouth. Two more officers hauled Tommy roughly to his feet. He was completely limp, dead weight. They pushed him against the wall and patted him down professionally. They pulled out his wallet, his keys, his phone. They emptied his pockets completely onto the floor. Clear, one officer shouted. Room secure, another confirmed. Chief Rodriguez walked calmly into the room. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing his civilian trench coat and a look of weary disgust. He stepped carefully over the crowbar. He looked at the drill lying near the strongbox. He looked at the torn signs scattered on the floor. Well, he said, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly over Lisa's sobbing. What do we have here? Breaking and entering, possession of burglary tools, attempted grand larceny, destruction of federal property. That's quite a resume you're building tonight. He looked down at Lisa. Lisa Martin, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I'm not a criminal, Lisa shrieked. She was thrashing against the officer holding her down, trying desperately to stand up. This is a huge mistake. My mother-in-law is senile. She forgot she moved. We were just checking on her property. Checking on her property with a drill and a crowbar at 2 in the morning? Rodriguez asked, raising one eyebrow. That's creative. I'll give you that. It's her money, Lisa yelled. She has cash in there. $400,000. She stole it from us. It's our rightful inheritance. Rodriguez leaned down until his face was inches from hers. It isn't your inheritance, honey. It's evidence in a felony case. And right now you're not an heir. You're a defendant facing federal charges. He nodded to his officers. Get them up. Take them to separate cars. I don't want them coordinating their stories. The officers hauled Lisa roughly to her feet. She was disheveled. Her expensive athletic clothes were covered in dust. Her hair was wild and matted. She looked at Tommy, who was weeping openly against the wall. You coward, she screamed at him. Tell them she called us. Tell them she said the money was here. Tommy looked at her for the first time in his life with something other than adoration or fear. He looked at her with pure hatred. She didn't call us, Lisa. She texted me to say goodbye. You brought the drill. You broke down the door. I told you we should leave. You useless, pathetic. Her words were cut off as the officer shoved her firmly toward the door. She struggled violently, kicking out, her boots scuffing the floor. She was fighting like a trapped animal. She wasn't fighting for freedom anymore. She was fighting because she couldn't accept that she had lost. Get her out of here, Rodriguez ordered. They dragged her into the hallway. Her screams echoed in the stairwell. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you. You don't know who I am. They knew exactly who she was. She was nobody. Tommy was led out next without a struggle. He walked with his head down, shoulders completely slumped. He looked utterly broken. He looked like a man who had woken up from a long dream to find himself trapped in a nightmare. As he passed directly under the camera in the ceiling, he looked up one final time. He stared into the lens. Mom, he whispered. The officer pushed him forward. Keep moving, son. The room was empty now except for the police investigators. Rodriguez stood in the center of the chaos, looking around carefully. He looked at the shattered door frame. He looked at the drill bit broken off in the safe's dial mechanism. He looked up at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. He nodded once. Clear signal just for me. I turned off the security monitors in the penthouse. I sat in the silence for a long moment. My hands were perfectly steady, but my heart felt heavy as stone. It was done. The trap had sprung shut. The wolves were caged. I stood up slowly and walked to the private elevator. I checked my reflection in the mirrored panel. My outfit was impeccable. My hair was neat. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a CEO. I pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator descended smoothly. I was going down to meet them one final time. I was going down to deliver the final blow. Lisa thought she was being arrested for simple burglary. She thought she could talk her way out of it with a good lawyer. She thought this was just a misunderstanding about a family dispute. She didn't know about the shell company. She didn't know about the federal status of the archive facility. She didn't know that the woman walking out of this elevator wasn't her confused mother-in-law anymore. She was the prosecution. The lobby of Forest Glen was a theater of blue and red strobe lights. The revolving front doors were stopped and locked. Police radios chattered with the static rhythm of organized chaos. Tenants from the lower floors had gathered in their bathrobes and pajamas, whispering and pointing. They were watching the spectacle of the handcuffed couple being marched toward the exit. Lisa was still struggling against the officers. She was shouting about lawyers and rights and police incompetence. She looked wild and feral. Her hair was matted with sweat and dust from my floor. Her expensive clothes were torn at the knee. She looked like exactly what she was, a criminal caught red-handed. Tommy walked behind her in complete silence. He was weeping quietly. His head hung so low that his chin touched his chest. He looked like a man marching to the gallows for execution. I timed it perfectly. At the far end of the lobby, there was a brushed steel panel that most tenants assumed was maintenance access. It was actually the private elevator to the penthouse. It hummed softly. The light above it turned white. The doors slid open with a smooth, expensive whisper that cut through all the noise of the lobby. I stepped out confidently. I wasn't wearing the stained old cardigan or the loose pants I had worn for 3 years. I was wearing an elegant navy suit tailored perfectly. My blouse was crisp white. My shoes were polished leather. I stood tall, my spine straight, my shoulders back. I held a leather portfolio in one hand. I looked like the woman who signed the paychecks. I looked like the woman who owned the concrete under their feet. The silence that rippled through the lobby started near the elevator and spread outward like a wave. The whispering tenants stopped talking. The police officers who weren't busy with suspects straightened up respectfully. Lisa saw me. She stopped fighting immediately. Her eyes went wide with shock. She blinked rapidly, trying to reconcile the image of the confused old pensioner she had bullied with the powerful woman standing across the marble floor. "Margaret," she gasped. Her voice was raspy from screaming. "Margaret, tell them. Tell them who I am. Tell them this is all a big mistake. Tell them you gave me permission." She lunged forward desperately, dragging the officer holding her arm a few inches before he jerked her back firmly. "Mom!" Tommy looked up. His face was streaked with tears and grime. "Mom, please help us. Please." I did not move toward them. I did not rush to comfort them. I walked slowly toward the center of the lobby. My heels clicked sharply on the marble, a crisp, authoritative sound. I stopped exactly 5 feet away from them. I took a moment to look at Megan, not with anger, but with the clinical detachment of a detective examining evidence at a crime scene. "Permission," I said slowly. The word hung in the air like smoke. My voice was deep, steady, and completely devoid of the tremor I had faked for months. "You're claiming I gave you permission to use a wrecking bar on a reinforced door at 2 in the morning? You're claiming I gave you permission to drill into a safe marked Federal Records?" Lisa flinched visibly. She heard the change in my voice. She saw the clarity and sharpness in my eyes. The fog of senility she had relied on was completely gone. You You're okay, she stammered. You aren't confused or sick. You're fine. Smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. I have never been confused, Lisa. I've been patient. There's a very big difference. Chief Rodriguez walked over to me. He holstered his weapon respectfully. He nodded. Mrs. Hayes, we secured the suspects inside the archives facility. They had breached the outer door and were attempting to breach the secure container. We have the tools. We have the evidence. We have the video feed you provided. It's a clean arrest. Lisa looked back and forth between us. Her brain was struggling to process what she was hearing. Mrs. Hayes, she whispered in confusion. Why is he calling you that? Why is he talking to you like you're important? You're just a tenant. You live in 3C. You're nobody special. I stepped closer to Lisa. I wanted her to see every detail. I wanted her to smell the expensive perfume I was wearing. I don't live in 3C, Lisa. I stage 3C. I live in the penthouse apartment on the 6th floor. I've lived there for over 10 years. I gestured around the entire lobby with a sweeping motion of my hand. I don't pay rent here, Lisa. I collect it from every tenant. I am the chairman of Hayes Property Holdings. I own this building. I own the one next door. I own the storage facility where you rented your unit last year. Tommy made a sound like a dying animal. He fell to his knees again, dragging the officers down with him. You own it, he choked out. You have money. You have millions. And you let us live like that. You let us struggle and suffer. I looked down at my son. The disappointment was a physical weight in my chest. I let you live like an adult, Tommy. I gave you an education. I gave you a debt-free start to life. I gave you every opportunity to build your own future. Instead, you married a woman who measures success in credit limits. And you decided it was easier to steal from your mother than to work for an honest living. I turned back to Lisa. She was shaking her head slowly back and forth in denial. No, this is a trick. This is another one of your delusions. You're poor. You're old. You can't be this person. I pulled a legal document from my leather portfolio. It had the official seal of the Federal District Court embossed on it. This is not a delusion, Lisa. This is a federal complaint. You see, when you broke into Unit 3C tonight, you didn't break into a private residence. You broke into a designated corporate archive facility housing sensitive financial data and federal tax records. I held the paper up so she could read the header clearly. That makes this corporate espionage. That makes it aggravated identity theft. That makes it a federal crime with a mandatory minimum sentence that will ensure you are an old woman by the time you see freedom again. Lisa read the document. Her face went completely gray. All the arrogance and fight drained out of her body, leaving only hollow terror. But we're family, she whispered desperately. You can't send family to federal prison. I leaned in very close to her. You stopped being family the moment you went through my medicine cabinet to check when I would die. You stopped being family when you told my son to put me in a nursing home so you could buy a new car. Tonight you're just an intruder. And I'm just the property owner pressing charges. I looked at Rodriguez. Take them away, Chief. I have a meeting with my lawyers in the morning to discuss asset protection and security upgrades. Wait! Lisa screamed as they pulled her backward toward the doors. Wait! Margaret! Mum, I'm sorry. We can fix this. I'll sign anything. I'll do anything. Don't do this to us. Her screams were loud, piercing, and completely useless. They dragged her through the revolving doors. The cold night air rushed in. The blue lights washed over her face one last time before they shoved her into the back of the police cruiser. Tommy didn't scream or fight. He just looked at me through the glass of the lobby doors. He looked at my expensive suit. He looked at the elevator. He looked at the mother he had completely underestimated. He mouthed one single word silently. Why? I didn't answer him. He knew why. The police cars pulled away slowly. The sirens didn't wail. They just faded quietly into the normal traffic of the city. The lobby was quiet again. The tenants were staring at me with wide eyes and open mouths. They had seen the confused old lady from 3C who used to carry her own groceries. Now she stood there like a queen surveying her kingdom. I turned to the night concierge who had been watching from behind the front desk with his mouth hanging open. "Henry," I said calmly. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes," he stammered nervously. "Have a cleaning crew sent to Unit 3C immediately. I want the door replaced and repaired by noon. And send a bottle of the 25-year-old single malt scotch up to the penthouse. I'm celebrating tonight." "Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." I walked back to the private elevator. Pressed the button. The doors slid open immediately. I stepped inside and turned to face the lobby one final time. I was alone. I was wealthy. I was powerful. And I had just cut the cancer out of my life with surgical precision. The doors closed smoothly. The elevator began to rise. I loosened my collar slightly. It was done. The legal trap had snapped shut. Now came the paperwork and the court proceedings. Now came the final dismantling of their lives piece by piece. But for tonight, I was going to sit on my balcony and watch the city lights and listen to the beautiful sound of absolutely nothing. I sat on the cold metal chair across the table from them. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee, industrial cleaner and fear. It was a smell I knew intimately from my years interrogating suspects who realized too late that they had made a fatal mistake. Lisa sat with her hands cuffed to the metal table. The orange jail jumpsuit they had put her in clashed horribly with her pale, shocked face. Tommy sat next to her, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. He hadn't spoken a single word since they brought him into this room. Susan sat beside me, opening her expensive briefcase with the slow, deliberate movements of a surgeon preparing instruments. "You can stop this, Margaret," Lisa whispered. Her voice was hoarse and raspy. She had screamed herself raw in the holding cell. "You can tell them it was all a misunderstanding. You can tell them you invited us. If you don't, I swear to God, I'll tell everyone you're senile. I'll tell the press you set us up." I leaned forward calmly. I placed my hands flat on the cold table. "You will tell the press absolutely nothing, Lisa. Because nobody cares what a convicted felon has to say about the victim of her crime. And you are not going to trial for simple burglary. That would be far too easy for you. You're going to federal court." Susan slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of the interior of the strongbox, taken by the police forensic team. It showed the broken drill bit she had snapped off in the lock. It showed the mutilated steel. And it showed the contents clearly. The stack of leather-bound ledgers stamped with the Hayes Holdings corporate seal. "Do you know what you were drilling into?" Susan asked. Her tone was conversational, almost pleasant. "You weren't drilling into a piggy bank or a grandmother's savings. You were attempting to breach a federally compliant storage unit containing historical tax records for a multi-property holding company." Lisa looked at the photo in confusion. She looked lost. "They're just papers," she said weakly. "Where's the cash?" "You said there was cash." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "There was never any cash, Lisa. I'm a retired detective. I don't keep cash lying around. I keep records and documentation. Those ledgers you were trying to destroy contain the audit trails for assets worth millions of dollars. By attacking that safe, you committed corporate espionage. You attempted to destroy federal tax documents. Do you know what the mandatory minimum sentence is for that?" Susan answered before Lisa could speak. 10 years. No parole. No early release. And since you crossed state lines to purchase the burglary tools, we're adding trafficking in criminal instruments to the charges. You're looking at a decade in a federal penitentiary, Lisa. You'll be 42 years old when you get out. Lisa's face crumbled completely. The arrogance, the anger, the entitlement, it all evaporated instantly, leaving behind a terrified child. She looked desperately at Tommy. "Do something," she hissed at him. "He's your mother. Make her stop this." Tommy looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow and empty. He looked at me. "Mom," he said softly. "Please. She's my wife. We have a life together. We just wanted to get ahead in the world. We were desperate. You have so much money. Why couldn't you just help us? I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had stood by silently while his wife stole my dead mother's ring. I looked at the man who had agreed to put me in a nursing home so he could inherit a fortune he hadn't earned. I did help you, Tommy, I said firmly. I paid your college tuition in full. I paid for your wedding. I paid your rent for 3 years when you said you were struggling to find work. I helped you until my back broke from carrying your weight. But you didn't want help. You wanted a handout. And when I stopped giving it, you decided to just take it by force. I pulled a document from my briefcase. It was a single sheet of paper. This is my will, Tommy. Or rather, it was my will. I placed it on the table between us. I updated it this morning with my attorney. Before last night, everything was going to you. The buildings, the investment portfolio, the savings accounts. All of it. I was going to leave you an empire worth millions. Tommy stared at the paper. His hands twitched. But now, I continued steadily, now you get nothing. Absolutely nothing. I have established a charitable trust. All the assets will be liquidated after my death and donated to organizations that help victims of elder abuse. You are completely disinherited, Tommy. You have no home because I'm evicting you. You have no money because I'm cutting you off. And in about 10 minutes, you're going to be processed and charged with conspiracy to commit a felony. Tommy began to weep. It was silent, ugly crying. He put his head down on the table and shook with sobs. He wasn't crying because he was sorry for what he'd done. He was crying because he finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. He had traded a kingdom for a chance to steal a few crumbs. Lisa stared at me with pure, undiluted hatred burning in her eyes. I hope you die alone, she spat venomously. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I will not die alone, Lisa. I will die in peace, which is far more than you will have in your cell. I turned to Susan. We're done here. Give the district attorney the complete file. Tell him we are not interested in any plea deal unless it involves her leaving the state of Illinois forever and never returning. And Tommy, I looked at the back of my son's head one last time. If you ever decide to become a man instead of an accessory to crime, you know where to find me. But don't come knocking without a sincere apology and proof that you have a job. I walked out of the interrogation room. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me, sealing them in their new reality. I walked through the busy police station bullpen. The air outside tasted sweet. It tasted like justice finally served. I had lost a son, but I had regained my life, my dignity, and my peace. And as I walked out into the bright sunlight, I knew that for the first time in years I was truly free. The plea negotiation happened 3 weeks later in a small, sterile conference room at the courthouse. Lisa sat with a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Susan sat next to me, looking like she owned the entire building. The district attorney placed a thick file on the table. He laid out the 2 options. It was a simple binary choice. Door number 1 was a full trial where we would introduce video evidence of her drilling into a safe marked as federal property. That road ended in a mandatory 10-year sentence in a federal facility with no possibility of parole. Door number 2 was the offer Susan had carefully drafted. It was brutal. It was comprehensive. It was designed to erase her from my life completely and permanently. Lisa would plead guilty to a lesser charge of attempted burglary. She would serve 18 months in a state facility followed by 5 years of supervised probation. But there were conditions. Civil conditions attached to a settlement agreement that would drop the more serious corporate espionage charges. She had to sign divorce papers immediately. She had to waive any claim to alimony or marital assets. She had to agree to a permanent restraining order that covered the entire state of Illinois. Once she was released from jail, she had exactly 24 hours to cross the state line and never return. Lisa cried. She begged. She looked desperately at Tommy, who was sitting in the corner of the room looking like a ghost of himself. He didn't look up at her. He had already signed his own separate agreement. Lisa signed the papers. Her hand shook so violently the pen tore through the paper in several places. As the bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, she looked back one final time. There was no hate left in her eyes anymore. Just the empty realization that she had gambled everything on a bad hand and lost to someone far smarter. Tommy waited until she was completely gone. He walked slowly over to the table. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just asked quietly what happened next. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a bus ticket and a laminated card. I bought a small construction company in Montana, Tommy. They specialize in building foundations for houses in mountain terrain. It's hard physical work. It's honest work. It pays minimum wage to start. Tommy took the ticket slowly. He looked at the destination printed on it. Billings, Montana. You start on Monday morning, I said firmly. You'll live in the crew bunkhouse with the other workers. You'll work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. You'll learn what it feels like to earn $1 instead of waiting for one to fall into your lap. If you stick it out for 1 full year, if you can show me you're capable of building something instead of just taking it, we'll talk again. Until then, you're on your own. Tommy nodded slowly. He put the ticket carefully in his pocket. He looked at me, and for the first time in many years, I saw a tiny flicker of the boy I used to know. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. He walked out of the room. He didn't look back. He had a long bus ride ahead of him and an even longer road to redemption. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The air was crisp and clean. The sun was shining brightly. I took a deep breath. Felt different somehow. Lighter. The weight of the deception was gone. The weight of the fear was gone. I took a taxi back to Forest Glen. The doorman opened the door for me with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hayes," he said warmly. I took the private elevator up to the penthouse. The doors opened into the silence of my sanctuary. I poured a glass of the expensive wine I had been saving for years. I walked out onto the balcony. The city was spread out below me, a beautiful tapestry of lights and steel and human ambition. The wind whipped at my hair, but I didn't go back inside. Felt strong. Felt alive. I pulled my mother's silver ring from my pocket. The police had returned it to me in an evidence bag. I polished the tarnished metal with my thumb. "It's done, Mom," I said quietly to the wind. "The house is clean." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted of oak and cherries and victory. I watched the sun begin to set over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and fire and deep purple. I was 68 years old. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. I had my peace. I had my dignity. And for the first time in a very long time, I was actually looking forward to tomorrow. The sun broke through the clouds. New day. New life. And this time I was the one holding all the keys. We often convince ourselves that family is a sacred bond that must survive any betrayal or hurt. But I learned the hard way that the most dangerous intruders are the ones who have keys to your front door. Tolerating disrespect is not love. It's enabling bad behavior. By finally drawing a hard line in the sand, I didn't just protect my assets and property. I reclaimed my dignity and self-respect. It's a harsh truth, but sometimes you must let the people you love hit rock bottom so they can learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Peace is a lonely purchase, but it's the only investment that truly pays dividends. If you believe that respect must be earned and not just inherited by blood, hit that like button and subscribe to Granny's Voice for more stories of justice served cold. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about boundaries. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their worst behavior and let them face the consequences of their choices. I gave Tommy and Lisa every opportunity to be better people. I showed them evidence. I gave them chances. They chose greed over honesty. They chose theft over work. And when they finally faced justice, they learned that the fragile old woman they thought they could manipulate was actually the strongest person in the room. Remember this. Never underestimate someone just because they're old or quiet. The quietest people are often the ones with the most experience and the sharpest minds. They've seen it all. They've survived it all. And when you push them too far, they know exactly how to push back with precision. Thank you for watching this story on Granny's Voice. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, respect, like trust, is earned through actions, not demanded through blood. Stay strong, stay wise, and never let anyone make you feel small. Until next time, this is Granny's Voice, reminding you that justice may be patient, but it never forgets.
This story was written by me and narrated using a female AI voiceover. Thank you for watching.